Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine frontline update for the, 9th of February 2024. My time might not be that day or time, your time. I'm a little bit delayed as I had some real audio issues. It's very late night here, past 1 o'clock, but I am in Ukraine and having an incredible experience that I will share more of with you as time goes on and as I'm able to put things together and whatnot. So bear with me on sort of footage and ideas and what I'm going to tell you. Here is the front line, as according to the mappers that I refer to, and I say I mean JR has done the mapping superbly again today. Thank you so much to him. So here we have the front line from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kremina. Not a lot of change there. There is some changes further to the south, and I'm going to whiz through the front line really. In Bilahorivka, talked about Bilahorivka yesterday, how one unit was kind of surrounded. There was this story of one guy left. He called the artillery in on him, but unfortunately there were no shells left for them to fire. Anyway, not sure about the provenance of that story, but it looks like this plant here that had been taken some time ago by the Russians, a long time ago now, and was taken back, and now it appears that the Russians have gained control over that again, as according to Suryat maps, and that is challenging for the Ukrainians there. But the topography doesn't really allow the Russians to do too much without an awful lot of effort. Some gains here to the north of Bakhmut, as according to Suryat maps. So that's around another bit, Bilahorivka, north of Yakovlivka. The Ukrainians there having a little bit of success, but haven't had too much of a chance to look into the details of what has been going on here. This is actually Vesele, where it looks like the Russians have been pushed back a little from there. There's been fighting over this now for a week or so, so it could be a bit of a counter in that area. And then when we come to look at the area just north of Bakhmut, around Bodanivka, just north of Bodanivka, Surat map shows that the Russians have control of a field just north of there. That's in line with Andrew Perpetua as well. So both Surat Maps and Andrew Perpetua agree to that. So, yeah, that is the news from the Bakhmut area. Again, I'm not being too granular at all, sort of rushing through this fairly quickly. Now, we come to Avdiivka, which is a very precarious situation. There has been a lot of activity over there over the last few days, lots of claims over what's going on in Avdiivka. Here, looking at this source, people remain in the basements of Avdiivka houses. It's currently impossible to evacuate them. As Barabash said, who's the one of the Ukrainian leaders in the area, the situation in the city is very complicated and tense. Only in the past day, on February the 7th, the enemy carried out more than 50 massive shellings on the territory of the community and about 30 aerial bombardments. There have been these claims over the last few days that the Russians have been absolutely hammering Avdiivka with aviation attacks, and that's making it very difficult for the Ukrainians indeed. No report says of the area that the situation in Avdiivka has deteriorated. On the eastern flank, Ukrainian forces have failed to push back the Russian forces, while the latter has taken further control of the area east of the coke plant and is pushing into the private sector southward. So yeah, it's all looking pretty dodgy there for the Ukrainians. The question is whether the Russians are going to be able to move through the town with the Ukrainians giving them that territory, maybe some kind of operational withdrawal, or whether the Ukrainians are going to put up a stiff fight for every meter there and maybe send in some reinforcements. There are some rumors, although I saw this from a very pro-Russian source, Geraman, who not very trustworthy at all, but saying that Syrsky is very much Zelensky's man. He's just taken over from Zaluzhny in charge of the armed forces, the commander in chief, and he is much more likely to be throwing, or the claim was that he's throwing reinforcements into Avdiivka. So I don't know how true that is. Some of the claims are that the Russians control sort of 20% of Avdiivka now. But yeah, as you can see, the main changes are to that northern area of Avdiivka there. And then as we come further to the south of Avdiivka, Marinka, the Russians have made some moves towards Herarivka, as according again to Surat maps, not confirmed with other mappers, but could well be the case there. And as we come further down towards Vuhledar, we come to Novomykolivka, where Surat maps has some Russian gains in the southern area of Novomykolivka, and I think that might be actually be a Ukrainian gain there, pushing back on the eastern uh, flank of, or the eastern, not the flank, the eastern parts of Novomykolivka itself. Now, there have I know Suchimimus did a video showing some pretty significant losses in Novomykolivka of Russian vehicles. If we go to Null reports, they say of Novomykolivka, after several failed mechanized attacks east of the city, resulting in enormous losses, the Russians still managed to make progress and reach the first streets of the suburbs. Fighting continues. So there are some claims of some pretty horrendous losses for the Russians. This is not unusual for either this area or the Eastern Front in general. So we've seen that up in Avdiivka. We're seeing that in Novomykolivka, where they do eventually make gains, but it comes at enormous losses. So the Ukrainians will be hoping that if they do cede that territory to the Russians, it will be at a cost that's unsustainable. And then Surat Maps again reports that the Ukrainians have made some gains in Velika Novosilka to the east of Urzhaini, which is somewhat unusual. We haven't seen an awful lot of activity in this sector, in general, but mainly it's been Russian gains in the area. So for the Ukrainians to make some gains there, that is interesting. Although it could just be absolute, confirmatory evidence of the Russians not being there, and that might have been the case for a long time. So this could be effectively a rejig from Surat maps, as because Andrew Perpetua doesn't show any gains there, and in fact it just shows an alignment of the two mappers, so it could well be a rejig. And then coming down to Krynky, we have again some positive news here for the Ukrainians. So this is really good news. JR said, correction, the blue pin from yesterday should have been yellow. So this was actually deep state maps showing some gains in the kind of eastern area or northeastern area of Krynky. Remember yesterday there were quite a few changes to the mapping, as according to deep state map, along this whole line, mainly in favour of the Ukrainians. And now we have Andrew Perpetua showing the Russians being pushed back from really quite large areas around here. And this might confirm a rumour that I reported to you. It could have been about a week ago now, where I said that there was potentially another bridgehead on the shore of Krynky, further downstream. So in this precise area here. So interesting that might well now be represented by Andrew Perpetua's map changes. This is, I think, very important, long overdue. This is an area where the Ukrainians have really needed to expand the bridgehead, because it was a bit like shooting fish in a barrel, very concentrated area. They need it to be much wider, and then eventually so wide that they can more safely bring across mechanized equipment. I think that's still a long way off. They really need to have large control over most of this whole area here for them to start considering stuff like that. But I think an increased bridgehead is definitely good news for the Ukrainians there, and shows that it might not just be about attriting the Russian forces in some kind of sacrificial bait here, but it could be more. Evidence here suggests that there might be an opportunity to do something more wide-reaching in terms of some kind of maneuver, some kind of move onto the left-hand bank of the Dnipro River here. We shall see, I guess, but good news nonetheless, and that's kind of what you need for the Ukrainians at the moment, because things are looking really quite tough around Avdiivka and along large parts of the front line, because the Ukrainians are really struggling for that aid. They need artillery ammunition by the bucket load. They need boots on the ground. Things are very tough for the Ukrainians. So any good news is certainly welcome at this point. The Russians, I think, are not exactly having a great time of things. They're making huge losses for the gains that they are taking. My opinion. I was talking about this in the car yesterday. I think to Greg and Pierre and Zhenya, saying that because the idea that Russia are on their knees is quite often rebutted by the fact that Ukraine are making huge losses in certain areas, probably more than is let on by the general staff. Things are really tough, as we know, with regard to ammunition. But I think what's happened is both sides are basically on their knees, and it's really precarious at the moment, and it could go kind of either way. Although I don't think Russia can fundamentally do anything huge. They can just eke out some extra territory here and there, but I don't think there would be a massive capitulation of the Ukrainians, as I've said many times. But both sides are really struggling. They in different ways. The Russians have just been absolutely decimated in terms of their mechanized equipment. And my opinion is that if Ukraine were given just more stuff, I keep saying this, they just need more stuff. The US gave them a whole heap of missiles and artillery ammunition, and if that artillery ammunition from the EU starts sort of flowing more readily, as they ramp up production, and when F-16s get there, then I think these things can really change in favour of the Ukrainians. And both sides on their knees. It's just very precarious at the moment for both the Russians and the Ukrainians. Anyway, that's my opinion. I could expand on that, but I won't. I'm going to move on to doing my other videos. It's very late. Thank you for watching. Take care. Speak soon.